Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and my bestest friend in the whole world that I will never, ever be parted from. Ever. Matt Freeman. Hey, Matt.
Hey, how's it going? Hey, do you think your parents might be like against us doing the podcast together?
You know, I never really thought about it, but now that you say it, yes, 100% absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll just hop in the bath together and we'll chat about that.
Yeah.
Matt, we are back from the third or fourth unplanned time off for this podcast this year. It has been a year for us. We don't ever plan to take this time off, but it just keeps happening.
Yeah, it's funny. I think we did pretty good not missing weeks of podcast for most of our career, but yeah, we've just been unusually sick. I think between COVID and other non-COVID yet still very horrible diseases. So sorry about that, everyone. And funnily enough, this is not even the movie we were supposed to be covering this week.
We've made all kinds of audibles and changes and different things, but we are back, and I am standing here today, sitting, to tell you that we're never going to miss another week ever for the rest of this podcast life. So it's a bold statement, but I think a fair one.
I believe you as much as I believe any politician standing before me and making promises.
Sitting before. That's the important part. Yeah. I'm standing, but I'm also sitting.
Right. Exactly.
Well, this week on the show, Matt, we are doing another one of our patron-produced episodes. That is the audible we gave because we were supposed to be talking about Matchstick Men 2 whole weeks ago, and then last week we were supposed to be talking about Matchstick Men, and then we said, let's talk about Matchstick Men, but then we said no because we owe this patron an episode, and so we're going to go ahead and do that. So for those that don't know, folks that pledge to us at the Supreme Leader Doof level or higher on our Patreon account, that's patreon.com/doofmedia, get to select a movie for us to do a show on. This time, our longtime patron, and very patient, by the way, since this whole thing got moved around, very patient patron, Jody, asked us to take a look at Peter Jackson's 1994 film, Heavenly Creatures. This was a movie that I think Jody was trying to get our council to vote on multiple times for our Doof Canon episodes, and it never just quite got enough votes for it to be a canon episode. So finally Jody just gave up and said, fine, if I can't get other people to vote on it, I will smash democracy and take over myself and make these guys do an episode on it. So that's what happened, and that's what we're doing today.
Well, that makes sense.
Matt, the other thing we're going to do today after we finish talking about this wonderful movie is talk about the new Dragon show.
Yeah, the Dragon show. It doesn't have a name. It's just the Dragon show.
I know it's kind of, I keep forgetting what the name of the show is. And so that's why I've been calling it the Dragon show. It's House of the Dragon. It's the new Game of Thrones show, right? That's I think it is.
Yes, you're correct. I think I keep forgetting whether it's Fire and Blood or House of the Dragon. And I think Fire and Blood is the book, right?
Yes, it is based off of. And I think the technical title of the show is HBO's A Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon.
That's great. That's really good.
Although I heard a podcast call it Hot D is the abbreviation of it. So now you should never be able to forget it, I think.
I did hear that. So yeah, that is that's good advice. Hot D.
Right, so
I'll just call it Hot D. Yeah.
All right. So after our review of Heavenly Creatures, we'll be talking about the first 2 episodes of Hot D. And that's going to be our episode for the week. But let's get right into it, Matt. Let's talk all about Peter Jackson's Heavenly Creatures.
They were 2 young girls living in a world of imagination.
I'm going to the 4th world. It's an absolute paradise of music, art, and pure enjoyment.
What they had was friendship.
What a disgrace you are!
Your mother is rather a miserable woman.
What they needed was freedom.
Do you like your mother?
No.
What they shared was a secret.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
2 teenage girls share a unique bond. Their parents, concerned that the friendship is too intense, separate them, and the girls take revenge.
This movie was written by Fran Walsh and Peter Jackson. It was directed by Jackson, and it stars Melanie Linsky and Kate Winslet. I believe this was the feature film debut for both Linsky and Winslet, which is kind of incredible, actually.
It really, really is.
Um, and I was thinking long and hard where to start about this movie, Matt. I guess we'll just start with an overall. What did you think of Heavenly Creatures?
Yeah, it is a hard one to start on, I'll admit. I'll say for myself that like when Lord of the Rings came out, I was really into Peter Jackson, and I think that you did The Frighteners, right? I love The Frighteners. That's a weird movie, by the way.
Very weird.
And then I never made it to see this one for some reason. I don't know why. And it's a weird, fascinating, disturbing, upsetting, extremely effective film that I loved and I never want to watch again. One of those, which is interesting. I wonder if it affected you quite the same way, or what exactly. I don't know. I there's so many different angles to start from. What did you feel about the movie?
Yeah, I think first of all, I'll say I loved it. I had never seen it before either. I had seen a lot of Peter Jackson films, and this was just one that I never got to. And I don't think it quite, disturbed me as much as it did you, although it is extremely disturbing. But I'm not like sitting here saying I will never watch this movie again. Like, it was not that level of disturbing. I will probably, if I see this movie on a movie channel one day, I will probably watch it again. So I really did love it. I think the thing I think most about it, and the thing that's so fascinating to me about it, is of course Peter Jackson, who is, as you said, like really a director that I saw The Frighteners before I saw Lord of the Rings, but I saw The Frighteners at a time when I really wasn't paying attention to like the concept of a director. So I really came to know Peter Jackson as a filmmaker from Lord of the Rings. You and I then a few years ago watched the movie Meet the Feebles for another a request podcast. I think that was another one of our patrons requested us watch that movie, Meet the Feebles. And I think that the most interesting thing, if you go back and look at and listen to that episode, is you and I kind of trying to wrestle with the idea of the guy that made this horny adult puppet comedy thing is the guy that made Lord of the Rings. And we were kind of looking for like, what is the transitive thing that exists between these two movies?
Right.
And the most remarkable thing to me was very quickly upon watching this movie, I was just like, oh, here it is. This is exactly it. This is exactly the transition from being this kind of cult, seedy, dirty, gross director to being this kind of director that makes this beautiful, enchanting fantasy otherworld. And it's like this movie serves as the perfect in between of those two sides of Peter Jackson's career. And I really, really loved it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, as a director, you really see the Peter Jackson style of the very active camera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like there's, push in zooms. There's his I forget the name of it. I guess they call it the Hitchcock zoom sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
There's the use of effects becomes very pronounced here. I guess he's pretty effects heavy in all of his movies when you think about it, I guess.
Yeah.
But
yeah, almost immediately too. Like I think the opening sequence of the film is the two girls running back from having murdered their mother. And the camera is immediately like super active. Like half of the shots are like a point of view perspective from one of the girls as they run through the forest, and it's frantic and it's moving and it's energetic, and it just establishes itself right away.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, it's interesting because doesn't that occur right after kind of this slow, like almost historical footage intro?
It's like B-roll.
Like?
It's like B-roll of Christchurch with voiceover of how like perfect and wonderful and quintessentially 50s it is.
Yeah, right. It's interesting because it almost feels like it's about 50s Americana, except it's about Christchurch, New Zealand. But it has that same tone of like propriety, and it's one of those things where as Americans everything you know about New Zealand is pretty much from movies.
Yeah, true.
And that's just kind of how it has to be because of, the way the world is. But very, very, it does a good job sort of being about that time of history, and I think maybe even Christchurch specifically, like, because it just all these characters in the school they go to, and like the way their parents' marriages are, like they're both these two sort of wildly different worlds that the two girls are from, and yet these are both coexisting in this New Zealand town.
Yeah. It's really fascinating, right? Because I mean, I think on the surface, this is a story exploring a relationship between two girls and how that relationship goes to the point where they murder someone. But it is about a lot more than that too. I think it is about the town. It is about, the world in a lot of ways. I think you're absolutely right that these are girls coming from kind of two different classes, and how that differences manifest themselves in who they are and the experiences they go through and all these things. It is also like, it feels very, I mean, it feels very much of its time, right? It feels very much of the 50s, but I think there also is something timeless about the way it depicts childhood too.
Right. I think that's my favorite thing about the movie, with the thing you just said. And I think this is the time to talk about that, which is like this sort of dark and an honest appraisal of what it is to be in that age range where you're sort of just at the beginning of adolescence, and you're aware of all of these things. You're aware of the onset of adulthood, and the sort of terribleness of the world has started to kind of bubble up around you, but you're not really quite ready to handle it. And you have these super intense emotions. I was thinking about this, and I was like, I didn't really have quite the level of intensity of friendships when I was that specific age. Although it, like, the way they behave did remind me of just like the intensity of like crushes that I felt at that age, or just the intensity of like emotionality overall, where I don't know, it's almost when you really honestly reflect, or at least when I reflect back on being like 13 to 15, it's almost a kind of like mania. And you can really believe that like a kid in that age range could sort of be like amped up to do something really extreme.
Yeah.
And that's what's fascinating about the story. We never actually said it's a true story based on a true story.
Yeah.
And it's one of these things where it's so shocking and lurid that you're like, oh my god, how could this happen? So you can see why it's really great grist for the mill of storytelling, because it's this great opportunity to analyze this idea of like what is it like to be in this situation.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at the movie, you kind of see this is Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh kind of trying to figure out who these girls were and what would drive a teenage girl to do this kind of thing. And the thing I find so interesting about it is it's a movie that has very little, I think you said this in some of our conversation earlier, it has very little judgment for most of the characters. Like I don't think this is a movie that's setting out to like damn these two girls for being murderers, I mean, which they were. It's not saying let's see how two girls become psychopathic murderers. It's just like, how does this happen? And what has to happen to make people behave this way? And I love what you said about the mania that it captures, because this is a thing, like, I think this is a thing that adults like us forget about childhood. And I think it's one of the biggest gulfs between a child and an adult, between a parent and their children, is it's very easy to forget what it feels like to be a teenager. And like, this is why I love movies like this. I love high school movies. I love all movies like focusing on this particular age range that do a very good job at this, is remind you only briefly what it must have been like what it was like when you were a kid, and how intense those feelings are, like how it's the most important thing in the world. Like it's very easy as an adult to look back on it and say, oh, I was just being ridiculous. Yes, of course I was. Like, but at the time it feels like this is the most important thing I've ever done. This is the most important person I've ever been with. Like this, like all these things, like the level of intensity of it is almost indescribable. And the kids don't know what to do with that intensity. It's all too much, right?
Yeah.
And so you like these two girls like created, like they were very creative minded, and so they created these worlds and these fantasies, and they lived in them, and they explored in them, and they explored their relationship, their friendship, their whatever ship, around the intensity of these emotions. And nobody understood, and nobody wanted to understand any of that.
Yeah. But it also doesn't condemn the adults too much. Like, it's really interesting how the adults are mostly just sort of sad, fallen, depressed people. You know, like we learn a little bit about each of the kids' parents, and they're all, you could argue that they're all struggling with something. They're all self-absorbed in different ways, but not in a way where it's like, you know, we're condemning them for being self-absorbed. It's almost just like everyone's self-absorbed. Everyone is self-absorbed in their own shit. The girls are also self-absorbed, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So the only real, I mean, there's some humor and there's some like condemnation humor when it comes to like everyone is worried that the girls are gay, and this is, and like my favorite is, you know, Peter Jackson's use of the camera and basically just like mocking them for how terrified they are of this idea, and how like the extreme close-ups of people's like mouths squirming uncomfortably as they're like unwilling to say homosexual.
No, that's great. That's really great. I would say they're a little bit more damning of the parents than you're saying here, though. I mean, I think specifically the most uncomfortable sequence for me was when Melanie Linsky's character is raped by an adult. I don't know how old that guy's supposed to be, the one that's the boarder that's staying with them. I'm pretty sure he's just an adult, though. Like maybe he's in college, right?
He looks like
he's staying at the college.
20s.
Yeah. So, but like she's 14 in the movie, and like that whole sequence is incredibly disturbing. I think it makes it clear that like she doesn't even fully understand what's going on here, and the fact that her parents get so livid with her about what she did, not what this man they invited to stay into their home did. All they do to him is just like, oh, you can't live here anymore. What they do to her is punish her. And then like we immediately go, and I think this is very intentionally, we immediately go from that sequence to the parents being worried about their children behaving homosexually, right? And it's like they're so concerned that their daughter might be gay. They're not at all worried about what a adult man having sex with their daughter did to her, what like raping her did to her. Like they just don't care about that. Like they're so much more focused on that other thing. And I found that just like incredibly disturbing. And I think there's a lot of judgment in the movie towards that whole attitude, towards this whole attitude of them being so concerned about any possible homosexuality between these two girls that we're not paying attention to anything else, which is, hey, maybe the reason why your daughter's acting up so much, Kate Winslet's parents, is because you just abandoned her again after, like, ever since we've got home, she's been behaving very peculiar. It's like, maybe it's because you abandoned her again.
Yeah, right. Everyone is very concerned with the appearance of propriety, and they sort of see their children as a piece of luggage that should just quietly sort of take care of itself.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you just said. I think the only distinction that I would make is that the parents are also portrayed as being tragic figures. They are pitiful. They are miserable, pitiful people. Simultaneously, I mean, maybe you could take the stance of like, well, the movie says they deserve it because they are so awful. And I guess I could say maybe that's not quite how I read it. I kind of read it as like,
no,
they all suck and don't know what they're doing, and so they just perpetuate the suck onto their children.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most sympathetic parent to the camera's eyes in my mind is Kate Winslet's father, Dr. Hume, right? Who's like, his wife is cheating on him. He's been laid off from his job, and he's just kind of completely trapped in his life and miserable in it. And I think that the movie's very sympathetic to him. I also think like it's interesting, the actual murder victim herself, like I think it's part of the kind of intentional illogic of the movie is that out of everyone that's doing terrible things to these two girls and or at least refusing to understand them and who they are and what they need, she seems like the one that is the most sympathetic to her daughter's plight a little bit.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like irrational how the way in which Pauline decides that it's all her mother's fault. And if they eliminate her mother, then all their problems are solved.
Oh, absolutely. That's the saddest like tragedy of the movie is that they're so desperate and sort of lost that they just anchor onto this plan of like, we'll kill this specific woman because she's the one who's standing in our way, and you know, you stand back from it. I think the movie you don't even need to stand back from it. The movie's pretty clear that it's like literally everyone is is against you guys hanging out together. You're only being allowed to hang out together like this one last time because the one family is about to leave anyway.
Yeah.
And then they're going to be gone forever and the problem's going to be solved. But yeah, I think it's like she has all of this friction with her mother anyway, and she has like decided that she hates her mother because her mother, you know, doesn't approve of her and her decisions and the way that she is. And really what could have just been in another life like normal mother-daughter friction where, you know, that the daughter is trying to carve out some of her own identity distinct from the mother as she becomes an adolescent, and the mother is reacting poorly to it.
Yeah.
But not like catastrophically poorly, just like not particularly skillfully. And but instead of it just kind of taking its normal course, it escalates in this horrific way because of, you know, the extremity of the situation and the fantasy lives that they've taken on, and how the two girls kind of egg each other on, where I don't know, it's really interesting how that plays into the fantasy element of things, because it's like they've played this game of yes and their entire, you know, friendship together. This is like this world they built together is the most important thing ever, and then one of them introduces into the game like, we have to kill my mom, and it's almost like the option of being like, ooh, no, like it's not, it's off the table. Like it's not, you know, Kate Winslet never actually I thought it was an interesting choice actually, because there's a moment when you feel like maybe Kate Winslet's going to be like, really?
Yeah, let's
kill
not do
your
this.
mom.
Yeah,
but she doesn't. There's, because Kate Winslet, if anything, is the more like living in fantasy land of the pair of them. So she's like immediately down for it.
Yeah, I mean, she's the one that introduces Melanie Linsky to the fantasy world, to all these concepts. Like, I think it is really interesting how much of the early parts of the movie is Pauline kind of aping and copying Juliet and trying to really adopt all the things she likes. Like, she doesn't know anything about the singer until she hears about her from Juliet, and then it's her favorite singer too, and then she adopts the fantasy world, and like she goes fully on board into all this stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was definitely moments where you could see like Kate Winslet's just such a remarkable job in this movie, but there's like you can see the hesitation, you can see the into deepness. But yeah, I think you're right that there is some like co-conspiracy yes anding here going on that just builds and builds and builds. Like it's funny because like I very much am of the opinion that like these two girls should have gotten to just be as close of friends as they wanted to be, but also the parent in me does go, maybe this isn't the best friendship for these girls either, you know. Like it's I think it's very powerful and important, but it also it is kind of all consuming in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I haven't thought about it too hard, but my feeling about friendships in that age range is that they can be incredibly intense, and then what usually happens is like just as intense as they are, like one person crosses a line that makes the other one, you know, pull back, and then like even the slightest amount of pulling back can often be all that's needed to kind of unravel the whole illusion. And it doesn't even lead to, it doesn't even necessarily always lead to like a complete collapse of the friendship, but it can be a kind of, you know, slap in the face that resets the dynamic, and then it can become more healthy.
Sure.
I definitely, yeah, I didn't have this level of intensity, but like I did used to have a pretty wildly vivid like fantasy life
Oh
where
yeah. Oh yeah.
like I'd just be like walking around and like practically speaking, like hallucinating. Like I mean, I still have a pretty good imagination, but I think my imagination at that age was incredibly vivid and like elaborate. And I could just live in that imagination world
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes the world that I actually lived in wasn't so hot. So I would just do that. And then, you know, if you're around that age range, maybe you have like one friend who will go into that imagination realm with you, and that can be very intoxicating actually. But it's generally self-limiting. Like I think that's the problem, is both of these girls were so unhappy, and you know, especially Kate Winslet's character, who was sort of I think unhappy understates it. Like she was traumatized by being, you know, abandoned in hospitals for incredibly long lengths of time. um,
Yeah.
and so that was definitely a factor in kind of keeping the machine running. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Um, I'm kind of torn on this because I mean, like it's one of the fascinating things about this story in general is because I think the instincts I have are, especially in some of the ways the movie is framed, is that this is a friendship that was very important to these two girls, and that should be respected and protected, and that no one in their life understood them or understood any of that. And that was part of the frustration that led to this great lashing out. But yeah, I mean, also it was a friendship that led to a murder. So on some level, it's got to be like, well, maybe it wasn't great all on its own either. I don't know.
mm,
But I agree with you. I mean, I had friendships. I mean, I had relationships, you know, romantic relationships that it just like you remember the beginning of like young love, like how freaking intense that is, and
yeah,
you don't want to be around anyone else. You want to be around that person and that person only all the time. It's all you're thinking about. It's all you're wondering about. And it's just all consuming in a very specific kind of way. And
yeah,
I think this movie captures that very well. And it obviously leads to this horrible, horrible tragedy that the movie does not shy away from the tragedy, actually. Like the actual murder is in the movie, and I kind of expected them to do like a pull away thing. Like we set it up, we know what's happening. Like the beginning of the movie sets it up, but man, we see them hit her with that brick
yeah,
a lot of times.
yeah. It's horrible. I mean, it was interesting because I kept, you know, I knew this was a true story. I knew it really happened.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what we were building toward, but I like the whole movie. I was like, oh, I just hope it doesn't happen. Like, I just don't want it to happen. Like, because her mom definitely makes mistakes in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
like, at, like parenting
Oh
mistakes.
yeah.
But like her
Yeah.
mom's not like a monster. Her mom's like, it's so sad because her mom's just like, oh God, I'm so relieved that my daughter has finally started talking to me again, because
Mm-hmm.
like she was just heartbroken that like her relationship with her daughter was so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you can find blame in that, but just look at it objectively. She's just like, she's just so sad that her relationship with her daughter is so terrible and conflictual, and she's so happy when it's like, oh, she's, you know, things are going to be okay. You know, the Kate Winslet's family's going to leave, and my daughter's going to be okay, and everything's going to be okay. And this, you know, and like the actress that plays her just has this kind of like quiet, hopeful happiness during that scene, during
Yeah,
the whole.
God, the way Peter Jackson lets that sequence linger for so
Yeah,
long. Like they go to
yeah,
tea and he shoots the tea in the way most of the movie is shot, which is like this dreamlike rosy quality to it, which makes it feel like powerful and important. And it's just so fucking sad. Yeah.
yeah. And the whole time you're like, you see the two girls are like nervous and like glancing at each other and glancing at the mom, and you're like, don't do it, don't do
Mm-hmm.
it. And you know that's why that scene lasts so long, is
Yeah.
because you're just like I was like, it was unpleasant. Like I disliked it. I was like, I hate this. This is lasting so long.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't do it. And then of course it builds up to it, and then like you said, it we don't get even the reprieve of a cutaway. They hit her, and then like she starts making these horrible sounds,
Yeah.
and you're just like, you know,
That
yeah,
that was the sounds like uh, you know, I think any human being is capable of doing anything if pushed into a corner hard enough. But
uh-huh.
like, I hear the sounds and I'm like, Oh, I could never kill someone ever. Like
Yeah.
I could never ever do it, because like even if I worked up the strength somehow to hit someone with a rock, like the first time they start making those sounds, I'm done. Because that is the one moment in the movie that I was just I had to kind of look away from the screen, because like this, when she starts making those noises, I'm like, how do you keep going after that, right? Like, how does that not just completely annihilate you to the point where you're just frozen and you're not doing anything else? But then they keep going, they keep hitting her, and it's just like, oh my god, how did you think that this is like that level of horribleness is the answer to all your problems? It's just wild.
Yeah, and it's one of those moments where it, triggers your empathy, because like it's shot in a way where you're like, I can feel that. Like I don't know when the last time was that you hit your head really hard, but it forces you to imagine the feeling of being just smacked in the head with a brick, and then realizing like, oh, they're just going to keep doing that. And man, it's a horrible thing to dwell on, but like the whole movie is centered around this, right? It's such a fascinating, uh, maybe even genius concept, because it's simultaneously, like we were saying before, I think maybe literally the best movie in terms of capturing that vivid mania of being an adolescent. And yet it's about this incredibly tragic murder. And those two things are intertwined inextricably in the movie. Like you can't really have one without the other. And it's just really, really a brilliant way of going about, because it's like the fact that you would literally murder your mom over the intensity of this friendship is the point. Like it's like that's how intense, not just this relationship, but I think generically how intense the feelings are when you're that age.
Yeah, well, and how much the fantasy gets wrapped up into the reality too. Because I think one of the things that I really like that this movie did is just how many times we're seeing, fantasy sequences, specifically the clay dolls that Kate Winslet's character is crafting, kind of enter into the real world and solve problems for our characters. Right? There's actually so many bits of violence in the fantasy world specifically, where people are coming in and the fantasy violent characters solve all the problems, right? So it's very easy to kind of draw a line from that fantasy to, oh, this is just part of their fantasy world that they've created. Like this is no different than the prince seeking revenge, storming to the top of the castle and freeing the fair maiden and seeking revenge. Like killing their mother is kind of put into the same bucket as that kind of thing. And I think one of the things that I love about the movie is that it does that remains true up until the first time the rock falls, and then it's almost as if like a switch is flipped and it's real again. Suddenly it's like totally real. Like there's nothing, of course there's nothing good in it, but you know what I mean? That like there was a way you could shoot the murder sequence in which it's just an action sequence like all the other fantasy action sequences they've had throughout the movie. The scene where Peter Jackson's camera like goes through the sand castle and like uses like the sand castle and all these things as part of the story that they're telling, and the clay things like being sliced in half. It's the evil clay man that abused Melanie Linsky. We took care of him, or a clay guy shows up and stabs I think the psychiatrist through the heart, and it's like seen as like this triumphant successful movie or story. And I think they fully believed that's what was going on up until the first time the brick fell, and then suddenly it becomes reality.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because you could sort of imagine a version where as soon as the attack begins, it like transforms into fantasy, and it gives you a bit of a reprieve. But that's not what the movie is doing. I mean, specifically,
and maybe a more accurate to Pauline's point of view would have that be a fantasy sequence, or like maybe if you had asked her, like that would be part and parcel of all the other fantasies she was living. But the movie doesn't allow that. The movie doesn't want to give you that reprieve. It doesn't want to give her that reprieve. It doesn't want to give anyone that reprieve. And so we see it in the most visceral, raw, disturbing, violent way we possibly could.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what's going through a person's head when? Yeah, I think it's likely that there was some kind of mental break,
Yeah,
because
certainly.
of course, after watching the movie, I went and read about like the true event, and the girls both spent some time basically in effectively prison, although at the time you couldn't really send girls of that age to prison, but they
Yeah.
spent some time, and then they were, when they got out of prison, they both went off to different continents, and they,
To a successful writing career.
yeah, one of them to a successful writing career, right? That's
Yeah.
that's
The Kate Winslet character Juliet Hume is actually Anne Perry, the crime writer, I think is her name.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I think I guess one of the most interesting sequences to me is so they go through that, right? They go through the violent, they kill the mother, and then it cuts to a black and white sequence of Juliet leaving on a boat and Pauline, on the shore, like screaming, no, no, like trying to be away from her, right? And it's like, that's a really interesting thing to put at the end of the sequence that they're the murder that they're committing in order to prevent this thing from happening, right?
Yeah,
Then uh, Peter Jackson puts at the end of that this sequence of them basically being parted, and it's in black and white, so we're kind of being keyed in by the movie to say that this is obviously not reality. This is something else. This is another bit of fantasy, but it's almost as if like in their mind that was the thing they were trying to avoid, and it's become just like a movie, like another movie that they're watching. Like, I mean, there's the great Orson Welles bit where they go see the Orson Welles movie, and how much it dominates their mind.
yeah.
But I don't know. What did you think of that sequence, the black and white sequence, that then very abruptly from the black and white sequence of Pauline screaming cuts to a color version of her screaming covered in blood?
Yeah, I think that was meant to intentionally to juxtapose and contrast the sort of poignancy of like pining for your friend that you love dearly but you're never going to see again,
Mm-hmm.
with the stark, harsh, sickening reality of what has actually happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's basically it. I think
Yeah.
it's basically um the whole movie is centered around the contrast between the fantasy that you can get caught up in, and maybe we should even generalize it, not just when you're at that age, but when you are, in a really intense relationship, no matter what age.
Yeah.
I think people go crazy. In fact, many, many, many murders are committed for that reason, right?
Sure.
The romantic jealousy. And there, and when you're when you're thinking about committing that murder, there's all sorts of justifications and feelings, and righteous, feelings of righteousness. And then I think it makes total sense to contrast that with just like the horror of like, oh, what have I done,
Yeah.
um
Man, there's something so, I mean, so awful about this whole thing, because like, friendships end all the time, and
yeah,
friends move and never see each other again. Like I moved in my life. I know you have. I have friends that I was really, really, really close friends with as a kid that I don't talk to anymore, and
yeah,
it's almost entirely because we moved away from each other, and that was terrible and awful and the worst possible thing to go through in the moment. It was like you could build a version of it just like them, with the two of them standing on either sides of a boat, watching, having to wave goodbye to each other, and how terrible and awful it is. And but then like you get over it, man. Like it's just, you could have just, yeah, kids, just stop being ridiculous.
yeah,
There's part of you that just wants to shake them and be like, come on, you're gonna find someone else. They're gonna find someone new. I
yeah,
mean, that's actually something we've kind of been skirting around the idea of whether this was or was not a romantic relationship. I think the movie kind of makes it clear that it was. And I think that is based off of Pauline Parker's diary, which basically said it was. But in my research, I actually learned that Anne Perry, Juliet Holm, has said publicly that it never was. That they were just, they were just friends, and they didn't ever do anything romantically or sexually with each other at all. So I probably believe the diary over a person who maybe has a vested interest in saying that. But the thing that I read said that Peter Jackson told them to play any of the sexual romantic scenes as if they were characters playing a part in the movies that they were creating in their heads, which I think came off pretty well. I think they're always kind of performing, I think.
Right. It's like it doesn't really feel like they're doing that because they're passionately, personally into it. It's like this is just another element of them mutually carrying on this fantasy together. And it's actually the fantasy that's important. It's even more important than their own sexual needs. And yeah, I mean, for my part, I think the movie, I think the movie itself is kind of agnostic about it. And then also, I just like the idea of this could be about a really, really intense friendship just as easily as it could be about a sexual relationship. Because, yeah.
I mean, to me, there's this tendency we have whenever we see an intensity of feelings in people to immediately go to the romantic or the sexual, right? Like it couldn't possibly be that two people just like platonically or friendshiply had this level of feeling towards another person. Like we immediately have to say, well, that must have been sexual, that must have been romantic. And I don't think it necessarily needs to be that way. I mean, it certainly could have. I'm not saying no, that these were not two women that were in love with each other, romantically. I'm not saying that. I think you're right that the movie allows it to be either way. But yeah, I mean, I think friendship can certainly be a thing that has a ridiculous level of intensity.
Yeah, and I like to consider it on those terms. I actually get mildly annoyed when people try to be like, oh yeah, those two, there's definitely so much sexual tension between those two. And I'm like, can't we just have it be about a non-sexual friendship? Because those can be intense. It's funny, the more we're having this conversation, the more I'm thinking about various friends I had when I was, roughly that age, probably a little bit younger, maybe a little bit older, where male friends of mine where it wasn't, we never murdered anybody over it, but like
I would hope not.
But like the level of kind of importance that I attributed to it was extremely high. And that's I identify, I kind of identify with a lot of the stuff that these characters in this movie are doing, just not to the heightened degree that they do. And I think that it's totally fine to read that into the movie.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we haven't actually talked about is the diary itself, right? Which our director read and has taken quotes directly from in order to craft this movie. And it's funny, on our other podcast, we had a discussion question this week around what is your favorite use of a diary in fiction, related to The Stand, because there's a diary in there that we were talking about this week. And as I was coming up with that question, I was thinking about this movie, Matt, because, this is a movie in which Pauline's diary kind of is played as the narration in the background of a lot of the events of what's going on here, and is remarkable, right? It's the language that Pauline uses here is so disturbing and yet fascinating. Like, I think my favorite is like, the next time I write in this diary, mother will be dead. How odd, yet how pleasing. Like it's just like horrifying and self-absorbed and completely understandable all at the same time.
Yeah, right. And there's a lot. I don't know. Maybe this is me kind of projecting onto it, but you almost feel like maybe the girls aren't really serious about it until they have like progressed the plan to a certain point of a point of no return, where they can't look weak in the eyes of the other. I don't know if that's true though. That might just be me kind of like wishing for that, or hoping that that's the case.
Yeah,
I found it very hard to watch for that reason. I found the movie very hard to watch because I was just not just toward the end, not just that ending sequence, but almost the whole movie. You're like aware of what this is building toward, and you're just there's so many off ramps from from the disaster, and so you're watching people make these decisions, and you're like, oh, you're just like, no, like it just causes me pain to know where this is going.
Yeah. I mean, I think the movie's great for that because it doesn't kind of lampshade where it's going. I mean, by choosing to start at the end, right? With you might not know what they've just done is committed a murder there, but I suspect that most of the people in New Zealand watching this movie in 1994 knew immediately what this movie was about. And I like that the movie doesn't really kind of hold that back in an unnecessary way. It like makes it clear this is where we're going, and then we're gonna rewind time and show you how we get there. I appreciate that very much.
The one thing about that first bit, by the way, when they're screaming and running and screaming and screaming, first of all, the screaming is so like unhinged and disturbing that like it kind of tells you what you're getting into. And then when you finally see them and they kind of run up on someone and they're covered in blood, they almost have this air of giddiness. It's not, the performance isn't correct, right? Like they're not clearly these two actors were not told like, look as if you just found someone who had been horribly murdered, or had an accident, which is what they were supposed to be doing. It was like, look as if you just triumphantly accomplished this secret pact that you promised to do together, and you're trying to act like you're horrified, and maybe on some level you are deeply horrified because you did just bash somebody's skull in, but this triumph is also mixed in with that, and it results in an incredibly upsetting a performance overall.
Yeah, well, it echoes so many other moments throughout the movie, like when they strip down to their underwear and are running through the forest. When they're running away from Orson Welles as they exit the theater. It's this thing where like the movie kind of wonderfully in those moments transitions between real screams. Like I think the Orson Welles sequence is one of the most fascinating things to me in the world, because they leave the theater, they're kind of haunted by this movie, and then suddenly Orson Welles is there and he's everywhere and he's around the corner and he's chasing them, and they seem legitimately afraid and they're running and running and running. And then there's just a moment when they get back to the bedroom after like running out onto the balcony, and like it looks like almost contemplating jumping off to avoid the ghost of Orson Welles. They run back into the bedroom and then they're laughing, right?
Yeah.
And it just like effortlessly and immediately transitions between screams of terror to screams of laughter, to the point where like I'm like, what was I reading it wrong? And it was laughter screams the entire time. I saw the looks on their faces and they seemed like they were legitimately scared. So I don't know. And I think that's part of the whole thing. That's part of the whole construction of this thing, is how heightened these emotions are, that they can just flip back and forth between ecstasy and terror and misery and absolute happiness. Like it's just, everything is at 11 at all times. And so any fluctuation in the type of emotion doesn't fluctuate in the intensity of the emotion. And and like, I think one of the absolute triumphs of this movie is how Peter Jackson manages to capture that feeling in how he shoots it. It's so great. And I don't think we've specifically said Melanie Lynskey and Kate Winslet are incredible in this movie, but these two girls are incredible in this movie. I'm not sure how old they were at the time of this movie, but they look very young. I mean, they're playing 15-year-olds, but I'm assuming they were adults, but they look very, very young.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Kate Winslet looks like she's like 17 or 18. That's a good question, though.
Yeah, Melanie Lynskey was born in 1977, so the movie was probably shot in 1993. So, oh, wow. Okay. So she was probably actually like 16, 17.
Yeah, Kate Winslet was born in 1975.
So Kate Winslet was a little older. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured. But that's yeah. I mean, the Kate Winslet. I mean, both of them are great. Yes, definitely. Kate Winslet, though, immediately you see like, okay, she has complete mastery over like her face and an awareness of like what the camera is getting, and just like all of the movie star qualities that are going to make her career.
her opening scene, right? Like when she appears at the school for the first time and then just kind of like immediately has a presence that, of course, Melanie Linsky's character immediately picks up on, but you, the audience, pick up on it too, right? You're kind of enchanted by this girl. Like she just walks into this brand new place and just immediately owns it. And yeah, you're right that Kate Winslet's like facial control is so good. I mean, yeah, you could easily watch this and go, she's going to be a star. But I don't want to sell Melanie Linsky short, who has had a long and successful career as well. By the way, I've seen her in like 40 things, and I don't think I ever realized she was a Kiwi. I legitimately did not know until this movie. I was like, oh, that's a pretty good New Zealand accent. Wait, she's just from New Zealand.
Yeah, that's
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't really. She's not an actor whose name that I usually remember. Although I agree with you, I've seen her in a bunch of things.
She's the classic character actor type thing, right? Where
Yeah.
she's really good in very specific roles. The thing I've seen her in most recently is a television show called Candy, which is another based on a true story murder story. Only she's the victim in this one. And she was remarkable in that. Like she's very good. Like I think she's very good at playing a very certain kind of character role where she's just good at playing. Like she plays miserable really well. And I don't mean that as an insult, but like a lot of the roles I've seen her in is a woman that is just incredibly unhappy in her life.
Yeah.
And I think she plays that very, very good. Like one of the I think the most enduring images of this movie to me will be kind of her just like slumped with a frown on her face and her hair kind of wigging out in a bunch of directions, and like the school picture one, like she just nails that particular look so well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, I mean she's great. I think one interesting facet of this movie that we haven't really talked about at all, except maybe tangentially, is like it is sometimes funny. There is a, especially with the current popularity of Taika Waititi, there's been more of an opportunity to kind of examine the New Zealander sense of humor, which, like the British sense of humor, is sort of highly distinct and idiosyncratic and very difficult to nail down for me anyway. Like I always have in any attempt to nail down what exactly the British or the New Zealander sense of humor is, I think leaves a lot out. But yeah, like now that has been kind of brought to my attention, it's like well, yeah, Peter Jackson totally does that. Even in Lord of the Rings, like Lord of the Rings has humor in it, and it's all this same flavor of. See, that's the thing. I can't put my finger on what exactly it is, but you notice the same sense of humor through this movie and through Lord of the Rings, and even in The Frighteners. When I'm thinking about it, there's a kind of dark edge to things very often. No,
I totally get that, and I know I probably bad job as podcasters, right, to struggle with exactly how to describe this, but I do know exactly what you mean when you say that, and this is to me kind of what I meant by, oh, this is the Meet the Feebles guy. Like there's moments in this where I'm like, oh, I see how this is the Meet the Feebles guy, and I also see how this is the Lord of the Rings guy. And you're right, there are very funny moments in this. Like I love the dramatic like unfurling of the banner on the castle that says "mad" when like this triumphant moment when they realized, oh, we know why we have more psychic power than everyone. We're just crazy. And then like we cut to this tall tower in front of a giant moon, and like slowly this banner unfurls that just says "mad," and just like the zany, absurd, absurdity of that humor, I think is just, that comes off as very New Zealand-esque to me, and very, very Peter Jackson to me.
Yeah, I agree. The other humor, I think, is mostly aimed at the parents. I think this is what we kind of mentioned earlier, is like the parents, while they are kind of pitiful and tragic, they're also frequently objects of ridicule, and just showing that they're kind of absurd lives. That's and just like the camera push in used to like make something that would otherwise be a serious moment into a gag. That's a classic Peter Jacksonism.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I think a lot of this movie is done from the point of view of the kids, right? And so, the lives of adults from the view of a kid is something of absurd and sadness. Like, why would I want to be that, and I think the only exception to that might be Kate Winslet's mother, who I think we're kind of supposed to see from the beginning as kind of this like enchanting upper class, like wonderful mystery woman. And then of course part of the movie is dispelling us of that delusion when we realize that she's just sleeping with all the people she's helping.
Yeah. Well, that's what's interesting is Melanie Linsky sees her as enchanting and exotic. But then also we see her from her own daughter's eyes, and it's totally different. Like that's one aspect of the magic of this movie is the ability to take on the perspective of different characters at different times. Like sometimes I feel like we've taken on the perspective of the the mom, the murder victim, and then everything seems much more like you're in kind of a different movie. And I don't think it's like maybe I'm being too literal, and it's not like the film literally totally changes the language, but like certain scenes between the parents, you really feel like, oh, this is just like what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Which we rarely get to see this. This is just the mundane world. Yeah, I don't know. It's great.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah. Well, wonderful movie. Really. I'm so glad we got to watch this. I had been like, honestly, when this first got nominated for the Canon, I was like, oh, I finally have an excuse to watch this movie. And then every month when it would not quite get enough votes, I was like, oh, that's a bummer. That's a bummer. So thank you, Jody, for finally making us watch this movie. Really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thanks from me as well. It's taken me, 20 years to get around to watching it, but I'm so glad I did.
How much more do we have in our Peter Jackson oeuvre? I think
probably a lot more than I want to admit. I mean, the Frighteners and Lord of the Rings, King Kong. I'm just listening.
Did you ever see The Lovely Bones?
Never saw the. No, I don't think I ever saw The Lovely Bones.
Oh, you should watch that. Not a perfect film, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then he's gotten really into documentaries since then.
Yeah.
Right. He did the Beatles documentary that I loved to death. And he did the World War II documentary, They Shall Not Grow Old, which I have never seen, honestly.
Yeah, I haven't either.
So I think the only like early movies of his we haven't seen is the real culty ones, like Bad Taste.
There's some of these. I don't know how. I guess these are. There's several. Yeah, Bad Taste.
I never saw Dead Alive either.
Brain Dead.
That's the same thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, then I don't ever really want to watch the Hobbit movies, and I don't think he would. I don't think he'd be mad at me for saying so.
Wait, you haven't watched the Hobbit movies?
No, I haven't watched the Hobbit movies.
You haven't watched any of them? Really?
I mean, I've seen parts of them because they come on sometimes, but I
did not know this.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that they were basically movies that were, first of all, a ridiculous idea to make The Hobbit into 9 hours of movie. and then also, he kind of disavows them. They made them in a way that was horribly depressing and stressful for him, that they kind of forced him to make them, and his heart wasn't in it, and it was all CGI, and it was a mess.
Yeah, I mean, one of the saddest things to me about those movies is the moments that it hits that exact right beat and tone where you're reminded of Lord of the Rings, and you're like, oh yeah, this is good. This I feel home right now. And then that's just a few little drops in a sea of crap. Basically, they're not good movies. Yeah, and the thing I will never stop being fascinated about is how in the behind the scenes stuff, there's a whole sequence for the making of the Battle of Five Armies where Peter Jackson is on set and he just basically halts production because it's just become too overwhelming to him, and he has to just sit down and realize that he doesn't know what to do. Like, like movie making is such a like a knife's edge type of dance, right? Where like you're constantly running up against deadline after deadline after deadline, and I think it was a movie that just like eventually it overwhelmed him, and he had to get to the point where he had to admit that he just didn't know what to do next. Like he just didn't know, we're supposed to be shooting this scene, and I legitimately just don't know where I want the cameras. I don't know what I want the scene to look like. I don't know how I want to do this. I don't know what performances I want. I don't know. And it's wild to me that a studio would release something like that.
Yeah,
because they usually try to hide that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I think the whole thing was definitely super rushed, because I think even at the level of the script, like you can't really make that story into 3 movies without adding a bunch, and then by adding a bunch, it's like not the same thing anymore. And he knew that, but he did it anyway, and then I think he just kind of regretted it. So
yeah,
but I don't really care. I don't hold it against him. I feel like, it was whatever. It's whatever. Lord of the Rings is amazing. Is one of my favorite things in the world.
Yep.
Still. So
and you know what, Matt? The King Kong movie's pretty freaking good. I know it's like popular to hate on the King Kong movie because it was very, very long, which it was very, very long, but that was a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
Any movie that makes you feel bad about a CGI monkey is successful in my book.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Planet of the Apes is great. So
that too. Yeah. That too. Yeah. So we've gone off the topic here, so let's go ahead and wrap it up on Heavenly Creatures. Again, if you listen to this whole conversation and have not seen this movie, please do. It's actually, unfortunately, rather difficult to find. We actually had to order a DVD in order to watch this movie. It is not available on streaming anywhere, at least in our country. Maybe if you live in New Zealand, it's available for streaming, but we could not stream it.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting, right?
Mm-hmm. It is, yeah.
I don't know why that would be, but yeah.
I don't know either. It's just too small. The world of streaming just isn't friendly to Peter Jackson's small projects from the 90s.
But I agree. Strong recommend for me if you can get your hands on it, for sure.
Yeah. All right, Matt, let's talk about some Hot D. I really like this because it's the only way I can remember how to title the show. Matt, so we have watched 2 episodes of House of the Dragon, the technically Game of Thrones prequel that takes place like 190 something years before Game of Thrones, something like that.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. What did you think of it? 2 episodes in, what are you thinking?
I've enjoyed both of them. I think that the storytelling is competent, the acting is very good, and it has kept my interest. It is the inevitable comparison follows. It is no Game of Thrones episode 1 and 2. Those, I honestly still think that people don't fully appreciate the genius of George R.R. Martin and the level of involvement and intricacy and propulsiveness of his plotting and character introductions. That entire first book is just, every chapter is just crammed with dramatic twists and turns, and yet never loses the humanity and the anchoring and the actual character psychology, and everything feels organic, and it's just truly a work of genius. And so you say like, yeah, this is more Game of Thrones, and you're like, it's not really. I mean, it's in Westeros, and it's got dragons, and it's got politicking, and it's got that's the king's hand pin. Oh, he's a high tower. That's interesting. I know that name.
Yeah.
But it's no Game of Thrones. But what it is it's entertaining. It's fun. It's got some cool moments. It's got some kind of like harrowing and dramatic moments that were really effective. And I'm still in right now, as of episode 2. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely liked the first episode more than I liked the second. But I think you're right that people don't appreciate George R.R. Martin as much as they should. I think the other thing is I don't think people appreciate Game of Thrones, the TV series, as much as they should. I think the unfortunate thing about that series is it ended so poorly that the kind of overall opinion on Game of Thrones is bad now. And I think we have to remember that show gave us 4 excellent seasons of television. It gave us 2 good seasons of television, and then it gave us 2 pretty bad seasons of television, and then 1 truly awful ending. Although, like, I saw a list, like, top 10 worst TV series endings of all time, and I looked at it, and of course Game of Thrones is on there, but it's just like every popular TV show is on that list. And so it's like, oh, so it's just like if you have a really popular show, everyone's gonna hate your ending no matter what you do. Got it. Okay, cool. So I'm not like, we talked about the ending of that show for a long, long time. I thought that season was very bad, and I didn't think it was a very good ending to that show. And I think that it's very clear that the people making it didn't want to make it anymore. So that being said, like, I think people are carrying a lot of chips into on their shoulder into this show. And I don't think that's necessarily fair, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I have some quibbles with some things, but I'm interested in the world. I think it's cool to see stuff that is only vaguely referenced to in the books proper, and then of course much more detail in the book itself, or the Fire and Blood, I think it's called, which I still have not read for some reason.
I kind of don't want to read it because I want the show to be I want to follow the show and be surprised, honestly.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair.
Here's one problem is that I'm sitting here and I'm like, wait a minute, is it Rhaena or Rhaenyra who's the protagonist?
Oh my God. I love I love fucking Game of Thrones with the names, because there's people with like incredibly complex names that you can't remember, and then John, and then Kevin.
Yeah.
And I think what the queen that died in the first episode, isn't her name just like Anne or something? It's just spelled differently. It wasn't that. It was
I don't remember. I mean, let's see. She was because she was a the same house as
she
Aaron.
was a cousin. She was a cousin, wasn't she?
She was an Aaron, actually. Yeah. I don't remember. Yeah,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The point is, the names are very funny.
The names are funny. I mean, and it's historically like that's the funny thing about George R. R. Martin is like he's a fascinating combination of like brilliant storytelling pragmatist and nerd who just can't help himself, because like absolutely, the king's name is Viserys because. And then Viserys is another guy in Game of Thrones, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm saying it wrong, but that's the other funny thing is you read the book and you learn to say it a certain way in your head, and then they say it differently on the show, and you never quite catch up. Mm-hmm. But like that's how dynasties are. They reuse names, and sometimes different characters have the same name. And he does that, and you're like, yeah, that's totally realistic. That's not what you should do in a book, though. That's or a TV show. People are just going to get really confused. Yeah. It's and he does it anyway, because I guess the like authenticity of it is very, very important to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, yeah, it's confusing and terrible, and also wonderful because you get to do things like in the show where you have names that people recognize from Game of Thrones, and then you get to be like, "Ooh, I know that name. I know that name. I know that name. Rickon Stark. I know him."
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean. Overall, I think it's good. I think the acting is well done. I think the performances are good. I think the writing has been pretty good so far. I do think, and this is a problem to me, that kind of reared its head in the second episode more than the first. I think it's a show that like it's really expensive to produce, and so it's a show that has like enough money for like 1 5-minute dragon scene every episode, and then they spent all their money on that scene, and so the rest of the movie is just people statically sitting in rooms talking, which is not like I necessarily hate that, but the biggest problem I have is that I just felt like the talking and plotting sequences in Game of Thrones were just so much more alluring and interesting and dynamic than I think this is a show that is like super, super serious a lot of the time, and people are having very serious conversations at all times. And there's no Tyrion Lannister to kind of poke fun at the absurdity of it all.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's the thing that like that hurt the second episode for me, is that like we had 5 minutes of this beautifully shot, by the way, beautifully shot sequence where they're meeting on this bridge, and it's the Dragonstone bridge, and it's very intense, and then young Prince Rain whatever like lands with her dragon, and it like really beautifully shot scene. And the rest of it we spend in the small council chamber, which I feel like the show lives in the small. Matt, when does the small council not meet? Because it feels like they're meeting a lot.
Oh, they meet every day, Scott. No, you're right. That's you're totally right about what you said a second ago, because like small council meetings in the other books, it was like this constantly evolving cast of characters, including such names as Tywin Lannister, Tyrion Lannister, Littlefinger, Varys. Like all of these characters are so interesting, and they all have their own complicated side plots going, and just layers of and like you see them having separate schemes amongst themselves, and they're all just incredible. And in this one, it's like, okay, well, there's the king, he sucks.
Yeah, he's the worst king ever. Jesus,
he just sucks. And then there's the Otto Hightower, who is a schemer, but the book is not. The show is not really having as much fun with him as you want it to, because it's like it's almost trying to like be cagey about the fact that he's a schemer, when in fact it's like, yeah, but like obviously he's manipulating everything, and you know, he's not nearly as like honorable and forthright as he seems to be. But
yeah,
and it's kind of fun to be like, oh, I'm smart enough to figure that out, but also it's like, okay, but can't we have more fun with this? Can't this be more dynamic?
Also, the way the show plays these things as if they're reveals that the audience didn't see coming a mile away. Right. Like the announcement that he's marrying Hightower, right? That's the person he's going to pick. They play it off as like a surprise, and it's like, oh, I knew that was going to happen from the second Otto sent his daughter to comfort the king. Like where this is going. So it's like, I don't know. That the other weird moment with that was when I forget the meeting at the very end of the second episode, where like the camera like turns and we realize the guy's been talking to Daemon Targaryen the whole time. We're like, I think like that's like, oh, well, I kind of figured it was him the second the scene started, because who else would it be?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just don't know if the show's really like nailing the intricacies and the inherent fun of the plotting that goes on.
Yeah, that's the other thing you said that I agree with, is like, okay, well, it kind of always felt like the protagonist of the show was kind of either Jon Snow or Tyrion, and usually Tyrion, honestly, because Jon Snow is actually kind of a straightforward character, and we you know, we hung our heart on Tyrion. And who's the protagonist of this? I guess Rhaenyra. I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
She and I'm like, is she really though? Like, I don't even know if her character. I honestly, and I'm not speaking from like knowledge of the books. Like, I don't even know if her character survives, for very long. Like, I guess she's supposed to be. She's the closest thing to our like Daenerys, but not really that either, because she's, you know, in a much different place in her life than Daenerys, and so you can't really kind of root for the underdog in quite the same way. She is the underdog, so you do root for her, but
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's early. I don't want to be too critical, because I feel like the next episode is going to be Daemon heavy, and I kind of expect Daemon to be an interesting character over the long haul. I hope like in a complex way too.
He's the most dynamic and interesting character in the show, and I think the thing that hurt the second episode for me is that he's barely in it. And so yeah, I mean, I think we need more of him right away, immediately. More Matt Smith. He's doing a great job. He is. I think it's very clear to me that he understands entirely what show he's in, and he's like really milking every scene he's in to play into the intrigue, but also play into the fun of it. And as much as I love the other performances, I think they're taking them very kind of straightforward and seriously. Maybe the other exception to that is Patty Considine, who's playing Viserys, who is just the worst fucking king ever.
Yeah.
And I love the way the show is demonstrating his uselessness while also like he's physically rotting.
Yeah.
Like the idea that he's doing like this completely unkingly, un-Targaryen-y inaction while his hand is being dipped into a bowl of maggots so they can eat away the dead flesh is like just the perfect Game of Thrones thing. And I'm just like, oh, I love this. I love this so much.
No, he's my he's currently my favorite, on the screen depiction of like a weak king, because he's not like comically weak. He's about as weak as most people would be if they were thrust into the position of being a king.
Sure.
Where he's just constantly like, well, what do you think? Well, how can I get out of having to make this decision?
Yeah.
It's just totally unfit for the job.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I really love what they're doing though is they know the type of people they're trying to bring into this thing. Like I think one thing the first episode did really well is use music as a way of guiding like longtime Game of Thrones fan through the thing. Like they just would use the Game of Thrones intro song like in the background of sequences, like where the music would start something else and then it would build to this, like you have that dun 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 dun, dun like that would build into it. And it's like just making people feel at home, like making their expectations align. Like it very cleverly did that. The only part of that I didn't like though was at the end of the first episode when we do that thing where Viserys takes his daughter aside and is like, I have to tell you about the threat from the north that we've been passing down. That I was just like, don't do that to me, show. Like, is that going to be a main plot line of this show? Or is it just we're reminding people that the Wall and the White Walkers exist so they know this is Game of Thrones? Because like, I think the one thing Game of Thrones as a show did do that's ruined for me forever now is the final battle with the White Walkers. I just don't care about it anymore. I just don't care. I know how it ends. It was ended disappointingly. And so if you're just going to do this thing where you're just going to talk about that just to remind people, ooh, it's there.
Yeah.
It's there. I don't want it. I don't want
it. The only thing I could potentially like about this is the idea that like the Targaryen monarchy knew about this for like 200 years, 300 years, but people are people, and the knowledge is either lost or it's like, yeah, we'll prepare for that, but first I have to deal with this rebellion. Yeah, no, I know, but first we have to deal with uniting these houses over here, dealing with the and just one damn thing after another happens, and then you like lose the opportunity to actually prepare for like that just seems like a very kind of George R. R. Martin sort of tragedy to pull, where it's not actually about like the heroic battle, it's about the human frailty of it all. That's the way in which I could like the inclusion of the idea of the White Walkers.
Yeah, so more of a broad thematic
yeah
introduction than a specific plot introduction. Yeah,
because I don't think we're gonna push on that any further. I don't see how we could really. I mean,
I don't see how it's relevant at all. Yeah.
I mean, I think the fantastic element is going to focus on the dragons, and I mean, I know some stuff from the books. I think there's a lot of dragon centric fantastic stuff, basically. Which that's one thing I kind of do enjoy. Apparently, George R. R. Martin was really insistent that they actually make the dragons colorful in this show, because he was annoyed that like Rhaegal and Drogon and Viserion are supposed to be like green and red and gold and like stunning looking, and the show just made them all like brown. And he wants the dragons to look like striking and beautiful and different, and so the show really does make the dragons look quite different. I really like the sound effects of the dragon noises. I think that's really fun. Like it, I don't know. I just to nerd out about it. Like I think the dragons are genuinely very cool and well executed.
They look fantastic. They look absolutely fantastic. I love them. I don't know how much I love the other parts of the show though. One of the things I felt this very acutely in some of the scenes in the first the first episode is like, oh, these are sets. Like there was like this one movement through parts of the castle that we've seen before that just felt like the way it was shot is like, oh, this is just a set. This doesn't feel like a real place at all.
Uh-huh.
And it's really, I mean, that's kind of what I meant about like we spent so much money making the dragons look fucking amazing that we had no money left to do anything else. And I don't know, it's weird. I mean, and like it's not just that it looks cheap, because like if you go back and watch the first few episodes of Game of Thrones, it looks really cheap. It is not a show that started with a lot of money. I mean, I think comparatively it still cost a lot of money to make the first season of that show, but nothing compared to what they were paying towards the end of that show, and nothing compared to what they have to make in this show, because the weird thing about the show is that they don't get to hide the dragon part for a long time, right? It's in the title, so we have to have dragons. We have to have dragons in every episode, and so yeah, we have to figure out how to save money elsewhere. And some of these sets, man,
yeah,
there's sets.
I guess it didn't bother me, but I can't really disagree. Yeah, maybe part of that is why they keep having the small council meetings, is because they're just like, all right, got to use the small council set again. We gotta save some money on this. I don't know. I mean, the costumes, it's funny. I think the costumes are usually fine, but then sometimes not. Like, I don't particularly like, feel free to disagree, but like Damon's extremely ostentatious like dragon armor looks kind of Ren Fair plasticky to me.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean about the set stuff.
Yeah.
I think you're spot on there.
And it's not even that all the armor looks bad. It's just like sometimes it goes a little bit over the edge. And maybe this is just like a preference thing, or maybe it's like I kind of got used to the kind of, you know, tactical realism style of the armor in the Game of Thrones. And now they're probably honestly doing more closer to what George R. R. Martin intended, where it looks, you know, incredibly badass and fantastic. But it's like no one would ever wear that in real life. That's not that his when he was jousting, he didn't even have his face covered. Like that bothered me the entire time.
I don't give a shit about stuff like that.
I'm not usually somebody who would usually nitpick to that level, but I was like, that's just not realistic. Like that just wouldn't happen. Yeah, whatever. Okay. I know I'm being silly.
I think it's like if you look at Patty Considine, who plays Viserys, he looks like a Ren Fair dude. Like I'm trying to copy this photo to you right now. And because it's IMDb, like it doesn't let you right click and copy for some stupid reason. But he just looks like if you turned a corner at a Ren Fair and you saw this guy standing in front of you, it's like, oh, made that costume at home, did you? And maybe that's like the point, because he's supposed to look like a dude who doesn't fit his clothing quite right, because he's an idiot and he's a bad king and he doesn't really belong, and he doesn't look like he fits. Maybe that's totally intentional. I don't know, but it's interesting. This is a show that is going to run for like 5 years, right?
I guess. Who knows, man?
I think it is. I think HBO is all in on the show. They know, like, I think the show's doing very well. Like, I think the first episode brought in 10 million viewers, which is a crazy amount these days. And so, like, they're just going to let it run. And so this is a show in which they don't have to play all their cards right away. They know they've got at least 3 seasons of a deck to play. And so they're playing them very slowly and deliberately. And so these, like, you look at what happened in the first episode of Game of Thrones, and you look at what happens in the first 2 episodes of the show, and you're like, oh, that's like a quarter of the first episode of Game of Thrones, basically,
right.
Plot event wise.
That's the problem. Like that. I mean, Game of Thrones season 1 of Game of Thrones covers basically the entire first book.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge amount of story, and that's why people loved it. Like, like if anything, I think the complaints at the time were like, "Wow, they're just blowing through it. Like they're missing so many of the details of these moments." And then you reflect on it, and you're like, actually, I think they probably had to do that for the sake of TV. And then as they went on, they, whatever. We've all had that conversation. But yeah, this is definitely like way slower. That is true, totally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, maybe it'll speed up from here. We do know, Matt, slight spoilers, I guess, there is a time gap, because there are like adult actors that are playing both Rhaenys and Alicent Hightower. that they have cast. These are the children actors. These are the young version. They have adult version. So we are going to kind of fast forward a little bit in time at some point in the season. So maybe more things will be going on. It'll speed up as we go. But like, I don't know, 2 episodes in, and like the biggest problem the realm is having is there's this weird crab man.
Yeah.
So somewhere off in the Free Cities doing some piracy stuff.
I'm sorry, that just feels like an anime B plot. It just feels so filler, and it's episode 3 of the show, which is just a bad sign. Like doesn't like we have to go fight the pirate crab lord. It's just like, oh my god.
I didn't like every time we cut to the pirate, like to the crab guy doing his crab guy things. I was like, what? This is weird. This is like, first of all, horribly inefficient way of killing your enemies. Like, you know how long it would take a crab to eat someone? That's a long time. But it feels not like the same. It feels like a different show. Like I honestly hadn't occurred to me until you said anime B plot, and I'm like, oh my god, Crabman is such an anime character. Like he's got a weird like skin mask on or something, and he's like being all dramatic and anime-y. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I mean, and what it is he's trying, there's a lot of stuff. My understanding is there's a lot of stuff in Fire and Blood that kind of rhymes with Game of Thrones, where it's like, okay, well, these aren't the Ironborn, but they're kind of pirates, and they're on the islands, and they're at odds with the crown, and so they're kind of like the Ironborn. They're going to serve a similar purpose to the Ironborn. And the Ironborn are pretty like caricatured also.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it's just too much. I don't know, man. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe I'm going to eat my words and love it, actually.
I mean, despite the negativity that we're ending this conversation on, once again, I enjoyed the show for the most part, right? Like,
yeah, I did.
I've liked watching it for sure.
I did like watching it. I'm going to watch the 3rd episode, despite the fact that there's like 6 other things I should watch. I'm going to watch the 3rd episode.
Yeah, the Lord of the Rings show premieres right now as we're talking. Right now.
Yeah, I tried to watch it like 3 hours ago before we started talking, and it just like wasn't ready yet. And I'm like,
yeah, they did like a weird thing where it was like available on September 1st, and I was like, sweet, let's go at 8 p.m. It's like, why though?
Nice, yeah. Okay.
Why? Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, you could just make it anytime. Yeah.
So maybe we'll talk about the Lord of the Rings show next week.
Yeah, I hope so.
Hopefully we'll have good things to say about that too.
I sure hope so.
All right. I think that's going to do it for us for the week. If you have any opinions on Hot D or on House of the Dragon or on Heavenly Creatures, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on Twitter at doofmedia.
Yeah, you can subscribe to the Doofcast on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, or pretty much any other podcasting platform.
Yeah, and you can find this and all of our shows, including Kingslingers and our monthly book club, over at our website, doofmedia.com. And if you like what we do here and want to support Doof Media, consider becoming a patron. You can head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and donate at any of the available levels over there. This episode right here, this one, is only possible thanks to the contribution of Patron Jody. So once again, Jody, thank you so much for contributing and supporting us and for making us watch that wonderful, wonderful movie.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jody. Really, really enjoyed that. Also, we would really appreciate it if you would give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, because that is pretty much the only way that the algorithm has of knowing how great we are.
That's true. All right, so that is it for us this week. Next week, finally, we're getting to it, Matt, the long-awaited episode on Matchstick Men, a movie I'm definitely going to have to rewatch, as it has been a month since I watched it the first time for the show.
All right, sounds good.
That is Matt's way of saying he will not be rewatching.
that is Scott knows me very well. No, it's all in here, Scott. It's all in here.
I'm sure it is. Well, we will find out how much is in there next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.